welcome to ESO Spotlight, my fellow roleplayers. As usual, I am your friendly neighborhood commentator whose name is Mikey. In an effort to provide variety to the show, I have decided to interview someone who could bring in a new perspective on things. And by new, I mean old. And by old, I mean, experienced. Yeah, that's the polite way to put it. He's a gentleman that's been on MMOs for a long while, spanning all the way back to EverQuest and EverQuest 2 to the more recent MMOs like Final Fantasy XIV, Guild Wars 2, Star Wars The Old Republic, Black Desert Online, and many, many more in between that time span. He is also one of the hosts for RPMMO Radio, a podcast about role-playing in MMOs, hosted on Twitch every 2 weeks without fail. The podcast itself has reached episode 22. Along with his co-hosts, they discuss a wide variety of topics, stemming from event coordination to linear and open-world RP. As a small treat, I'm happy to say that I'll be interviewing all three of these hosts and releasing their episodes in a 1 week successive manner instead of the bi-weekly basis. I'm also happy to say that I've been able to call in to their show on more than one occasion and offer my input. But without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Welcome to the show, Ashen Phoenix. God help you. I know you were probably drunk and regretting this now, but you're here anyway. It's a pleasure to have you.
I am, and on both accounts. Thank you for having me. How's it going, Mikey?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'm going to kick it off right here. I like to do this thing where I refer to my guests by their real names. It helps me distinguish the person from the online persona from the role player. Would you mind if I start using your real name for like the rest of the interview?
From now on, you may call me Betty.
Very well, Betty.
Kung Fu. Yes, go ahead and call me Mike. That's perfectly fine.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, Mike. It's sincerely appreciated, and let's just jump right into it. Where are you from? How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
You never ask a lady their age, but I'll tell you anyway. I'm 38, and currently I am living in Oklahoma, but I was born out in the great state of California.
Okay. And how'd you get into video games?
Oh, man. The very first thing I ever remember when it comes to video games is going over to the cool friends of my parents who had this Atari 2600 when I was just a little kid, and playing with the joystick, playing things like Moon Patrol and the Popeye game, and just all those old Atari games. That was the very first time I remember playing video games, was playing on that Atari. And then after that, it went to the NES and the SNES. Didn't do the Sega thing because SNES was way better, and Sega is garbage. So, and from there on, after that, it's just keep on going, really.
So, what was your first video game, if you can remember that?
Being that young, I specifically remember things. I remember Defender and Popeye. I remember the Popeye one very good. It was kind of like a crappy version of the original Mario Brothers before they got the Super in it, and before Donkey Kong and all that stuff.
So, like Bluto running the turtles?
Right. Well, instead of turtles, it was Bluto chasing you down, and you had to try to get up to olive oil, and it was obviously all giant. It was like it had a solid 3 colors in it, with giant, like blocky looking Popeyes and stuff like that. And yeah, and you get the spinach can, and that was their invincibility, that kind of stuff. That's the first one I really, really remember, and always like wanting to play, because I loved Popeye as a kid too. Shows my age.
We age with the damage, not with the number, right?
Yeah, and the mileage.
So, do you have a favorite video game?
Zelda series. My all-time favorite, of course, is A Link to the Past on the SNES. And if you call it a SNES, we will end this interview right now, because that is not how you pronounce it. It is an SNES or a Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or Super.
Well, you see, sir, I too am a man of culture, so I know to call it an SNES.
Then we may continue.
I played the Link to the Past. I also played Oracle of Seasons. I think it was a
Game Boy
version. Yeah, when it came out.
Yeah, those Zelda's always had. I've got no a Switch yet. I'm really looking forward to getting it for the new Zelda, which I've heard is awesome, and the Mario and all this. I'm really looking forward to getting back into Nintendo. I've skipped the last two incarnations of their systems because they were garbage. The Wii and the Wii U. And in the last several Zelda games, even though I tried to play them at friends, I just couldn't get into them. They just weren't Zelda. You know, I've had more fun getting the SNES Classic that I managed to actually get a hold of playing A Link to the Past again than I have in the last several Zelda games.
Okay. I'm going to enjoy this next question. I know I will. But how did you get into MMOs?
That was actually a friend of mine who actually did a lot of firsts for me. He's the first time I really played Dungeons and Dragons, and he also got me to try this game called EverQuest, and even warned me that people called it Evercrack. And that was actually my first MMO, was EverQuest, and I got in there. Came out in '99, and I think I got in there in between 2000 2001 somewhere. So it was just after their first expansion, Rise of Kunark, came out. And that was my very first MMO. And I didn't roleplay in it funny enough, even though it was a D&D guy who was, showed me kind of how to roleplay. We didn't actually roleplay in the game. It was still a new era. I mean, it was kind of the golden era of MMOs, that between 2000 and I'd say 2010. We've kind of been in a slump for the last 7 years as far as I'm concerned.
You think so?
I think game-wise, at least. Roleplay-wise, we've actually come a long way, and the community as a whole is much more solid and one-minded. But the games themselves, they stopped innovating after WoW. Everything after that kind of just tries to recreate what WoW does instead of trying to do their own thing. Or, and if they don't, they end up failing miserably, like ArcAge and things like that, where they tried something, but they didn't do it right.
See, I remember, for me, I always felt that, especially nowadays, well, not nowadays, but I would say perhaps 2011 to 2014, the MMO market was just super saturated. You had MMOs just popping out left, right, and center, trying to constantly outdo World of Warcraft. I remember when Star Wars came out, and it was being strutted around as, like, the WoW killer, They had like a massively inflated advertising budget.
Well, yeah, but Star Wars, they could afford whatever the hell they wanted. I mean,
and that evil, vile corporation that is EA. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, right. And still, to me, as much as I did enjoy the storylines in Galaxy, or not Star Wars, the Old Republic, but Star Wars Galaxies before the NGE, the new game engines, and before they screwed it up, was still probably the best Star Wars MMO they've made so far. And that's actually one of the ones I really started to get into roleplay into as well. So that's another reason it has a special place in my heart.
Okay. See, that tends to bring me towards that whole dichotomy between open world and theme park MMO, right? It was WoW that popularized the theme park, I think. Did you ever play WoW? I'm curious.
The problem with WoW was it came out literally within like a couple months, or within the same month, I think. I can't remember now. As EverQuest 2, and I had not really been in EverQuest anymore. I played that for 4 years. I still loved the world of Norath, and I still do to this day, despite the fact that I hope that they just sell off the entire thing, because Daybreak Games is a terrible company that is destroying all their properties.
I've heard that complaint a lot of times.
They've done some seriously bad stuff. But no, EverQuest 2 came out, so I went with that, obviously, instead. I did try WoW, and while I didn't have any problems with it, it never grabbed me the way EverQuest 2 kind of, even the EverQuest 2 didn't grab me right off the bat. But it was pretty slim pickings that first year that it came out before they finally got it going. But it never, World of Warcraft, I have nothing against it. I know it's the big dog on the block for a reason, and I know a lot of people love it. And I'm not one of those gamers that's like, you like World of Warcraft, you're just playing a baby's game. Yeah, I don't care. If you're having fun, whatever. I don't really give a shit. I don't even know if we're cussed or not. But
don't hold back. There's no censorship on this show. Go ahead. Swear as much as you want.
Poop. I'm not one of those people that does that. World of Warcraft is a great game. It's king of the hill for a reason. It's been sliding in recent years, but even at the maybe 5 or 6 million subscribers it has concurrently, still top of the hill. Even though they may have lost half their population, they're still doing better than everybody else out there. So whether that was, I almost wonder these days that if that was just a lightning in a bottle that struck once and will probably never happen. I don't know if that will ever happen in another MMO, to be honest with you. The only thing I could see changing that would be if VR ever mattresses take off and there's a version of like a WoW or EverQuest, because EverQuest was huge back in the day too. It was the first 3D MMO at the time. It was revolutionary, even though by today's standards it's this primitive thing. But a VR game might actually be able, if you could get something like that, you might be able to get those numbers again. But as things are currently coming out, I don't see anything on the horizon that gets even remotely close.
I think you mentioned it before, but what was the first MMO that you started your RP in?
Matrix Online.
Oh, you're not the first person to tell me that. Okay,
I know, right? But it that was where I never roleplayed in EverQuest, and Matrix Online before Star Wars Galaxies came out. I'm pretty sure that was the timeline. Otherwise, it's Star Wars Galaxies, but I was already role-playing by the time Galaxies came out and had my characters and stuff picked out, so it has to be Matrix. But I kind of got into it in that. I didn't even intend to, but I bumped into a couple role-play communities, and it was really a good game for that kind of thing because you could play a character that wasn't you, but you could still use all your modern references and things like that because it took place during, it was a digital thing, but
it was very urban.
Yeah, it took place in the modern era, the modern era of the, mid 2000s. But I remember going to in-game raves. One of the guild leaders, and I cannot remember the guild name because I have a terrible memory for names. I do remember his name was Vex, though, Veks, and his wife were the leaders of the guild, but he was also a quote-unquote DJ. I don't know if he was an actual DJ in real life or he was just an aspiring internet one, but there were some audio channels that you could stream to at the time, and he would, DJ it, and we would have a party in the game. Everyone would be dancing around because Matrix Online actually had the ability when two people did an emote with one selected, your characters would actually dance together in sync instead of, doing it all separately like most of them do.
That's pretty handy.
Yeah, and it had, you could actually physically slap.
Why can't we do that in this game?
That's exactly why nobody's really done that since. You could actually select a person and do like /slap, and your characters would actually get into sync, and when you hit them, you physically hit them in the game. It matched up, and the other character reacted and got slapped back. And the great thing was, they even thought ahead so that it couldn't be trolled. When you did something like that, the person you had selected had to approve it. So if they didn't want you to slap them, you didn't get the chance to slap them. It had to be approved on both ends.
Damn, that's pretty revolutionary.
And it's gone. It flared up in that game, and now it's
on. We have the technology for 2 big mega servers, and we don't have the
right. Yeah, this is early 2000s. It's when the Matrix was relevant.
Right.
It's been a little while, and yet I've never seen anything like it since.
From Matrix, where else did you bounce to for your RP journey?
Galaxies, I think, was the next big one. And I've really played damn near every MMO from here to there of any size or scope. Even if it was only briefly, just because, you don't know if you might like it or how great it might be or how bad it might be until you try it out.
For sure.
But Galaxy is the next. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. R2-D2's favorite character. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got about a dozen R2-D2s on my desk right now. He's just the best character. I absolutely love Star Wars. I'm one of those, before it was called cosplay, I was one of the people in the early 2000s that dressed up in Stormtrooper armor. It was even before the formation of the 501st Legion for you real nerds out there.
I was going to ask you about that if you had any part in that.
No, I don't. They do really good stuff. They're way too structured, and also the fact that I outfatted my armor. I graduated in 1998 at about 115, 20 pounds. I no longer weigh that same amount of weight. I've been married far too long to be able to maintain that same amount of weight. And that was with the wife I was miserable with. So no, I've no longer have that armor, but I love Star Wars. So Galaxies, was so looking forward to that. I had a Terrace costume master named Valen Gray. He was kind of force sensitive, but obviously the Jedi didn't exist because I'm not breaking canon. But he didn't know he was force sensitive. He just knew he was really fast and had great reflexes. And then, unfortunately, after the NGE, they went to a class-based system and they took out Terrace Costi, and that basically, in one patch, destroyed all my roleplay.
So let's talk about Star Wars, because I too am a man of culture. No, sorry, I'm just kidding. But okay, let's talk about Star Wars. Sith or Jedi?
Ooh, God, I love them both, but I like the Jedi. I gotta go with Jedi.
Of which era?
I'll be honest, the Old Republic era. I loved the Old Republic. I was even saying it back in Galaxies when they were screwing it up and putting Jedi into it, that they needed to make an MMO based on the Knights of the Old Republic comic books. Or no, that was the game. Was it? I think it was just called
there wasn't.
There was comics, but it was just called the Old Republic.
No, it was called the Knights of the Old Republic comic.
Oh no, it was Tales of the. Yeah, Tales of the Old Republic. That's what it was called. Tales of the Old Republic. With Exar Kun and Nomi Sunrider, which they're no longer legally allowed to use.
I thought they were called Tales of the Jedi.
Was that it?
Tales of the Jedi is Nomi Sunrider.
Okay, Tales of the Jedi. God, it's been so long since I read those comics. Yeah, you're right, Tales of the Jedi. But I loved those comics. Those were amazing comics. When they went into the origins of the Jedi, and the actual Sith were a race and a species of people. Until Exar Kun, basically culturally appropriated everything they were. He culturally appropriated before it was cool. But to show you the kind of fan I am of Star Wars, when we had our house built here in Oklahoma, our backsplash, which for those people that don't know what that is, that's the area behind your counters and your stove, has tiles alternating between the Old Republic and the New Jedi. No, not the Old Republic. The Jedi Order with the two wings and the lightsaber in the middle, and the crest of the Empire alternating in tiles in our actual put into our house.
That's pretty damn badass.
And my wife approved of it because she is awesome.
That is a woman worth.
Yeah, we're still married.
To.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
It started out as a joke when we were trying to decide what to do. I said, what do you think about mosaic Yoda? Just doing a whole bunch of tiny tiles and making Yoda's face in the back. And she's like, no, I don't think so. That's a little much. And I said, what about if we did just Sith and Jedi tiles? Well, now that's a little different. I was like, wait, what? Oh, I love you so much. You're the best.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Favorite Jedi Master excluding the God trio, that is Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, and Luke Skywalker. Excluding those three.
Man, I do like Qui-Gon quite a bit, but I wouldn't say he's my favorite. I'd have to almost go back all the way to the Nomi Sunrider, and I can't remember his name now. The thing that looked like a Triceratops, that was her Jedi Master. I know, right? Her Jedi Master, he was able to speak, but he was quadruped, and he was a giant, kind of almost like a dinosaur looking thing. But he's who trained Nomi Sunrider to use the Force and all that after her husband was killed.
You make me think of the only Jedi Masters I can recall from that is Arca-Jeth, the elf-looking dude, and Vodo-Boss, the lobster-looking guy that uses staff. Those are the only two I can remember that were Jedi Masters. Yeah,
I remember them. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, because I did like Vodo-Boss. He was pretty cool. Oh, I'm gonna have to find it now. You're gonna drive me crazy with that one.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Look it up because that's gonna drive me crazy too.
All right. Master Thawne, I think is his name.
Master Thawne.
Let's see. Yeah, that's it. Master Thawne. Jedi Master Thawne. He's I'm not even gonna try it. Chukthai. But he literally, if you look up Jedi Master Thawne, he literally looks like a Triceratops. Almost.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got a gray beard, but he's got that big, like a Triceratops, that big fanning thing like that. But he was Nomi Sunrider's. I remember him because I actually drew a long time ago when I took art and stuff. I actually drew the two of them together probably one of the better pictures I've done from ages ago. But yeah, Master Thawne was one of my favorites because he was just it was such a different thing to have. He's bipedal. He can't even hold the lightsaber.
Right.
But he was still a Jedi Master.
Okay, let's move over to the Old Republic, because that was also a big part of my MMO career, of my MMO-RP experience. But I want to know, what was the tour RP scene like for you? Did you RP on the Ebon Hawk or on Lord Adras?
Ebon Hawk.
Okay.
We were definitely on Ebon Hawk, because that was the unofficial roleplay server. No, that was the one that they actually think that was a game that they actually put RP after the server. I lose track of which ones do it and which ones don't anymore. And as much as I played a Jedi, his name was, I want to say it was Zarin, with an X, and then I had a Xanatos also with an X. One of the things I've done for a long time, and a lot of my roleplay is most of my characters somewhere in their name have an X ever since Xanis from EverQuest 2. But we all kind of, we jumped ship, a whole bunch of us from EQ2. We were still playing it, but I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so I had to give it a try. And while I loved the game and the story, it really wasn't roleplay friendly to me. They made it exceedingly difficult by not allowing you to communicate with the other faction. Like,
Yes,
you couldn't send personal tells. You couldn't, if you went to Narshada, you couldn't see the other, if somebody forgot and started doing emotes, you couldn't see even emotes, which was just such a stupid thing, but you could still see /say. And I think that really, for roleplay wise, probably did more damage to that game's roleplay community than anything else in the game mechanics. That one little glitch and hiccup made things so difficult for people because you couldn't coordinate with, the good guys and bad guys, good guilds, bad guilds. You couldn't coordinate with each other.
Sure.
And that's, and obviously in roleplay communication, especially if you're going to do good guy versus bad guy, somebody obviously is going to have to lose. And if somebody disagrees or something, the only way to do that is to air all your dirty laundry out in /say. Right. Which is a terrible thing to do in roleplay when you're having a disagreement.
Sure. One of the things that I didn't like about, and this is just a humble observation about Ebon Hawk, is that there were a lot more people coloring outside of the lines, if that makes sense.
Stretching of the lore.
Stretching of the lore, yeah.
Yeah, the Gray Jedi thing, which... God help us all if they bring that into episode 8, which is my biggest fear given the trailers that they've shown so far, which I still don't think will happen. I think the current trailers for episode 8 are a lot of smoke and mirrors to try to keep people guessing. And I think if that's what they're doing, that's very smart. And if it's not, it's gonna suck.
Yeah,
I really don't want it to. I really, really don't want it to.
I remember reading in an interview that Mark Hamill had where he was talking to the director, and before he actually began filming, he said to the directors, I fundamentally disagree with everything that Luke does in this movie. That being said, I will be the actor and play the part. So that is definitely a red flag for me, because I'm a Luke fanboy, man.
Oh, yeah. I'm always... If I had to pick between them, obviously R2. R2's my homeboy. Without R2, the entire galaxy is in chaos and rules by Sith for the next 1,000 years. Let's be honest. Episode 1 would have been extremely short, and Padme's dead. The end. But I've always loved Solo, even a little bit over Luke. But I do love Skywalker. Not the previous Skywalker, the whiny little one that didn't like sand. How that guy turned into a giant badass at the end of Rogue One, I don't know. Luke was great.
I guess you didn't like the prequel. Obviously, you didn't like the prequel trilogy.
I actually do, but I still know it for its glaring flaws. It just, they could have done so much better. I think, honestly, even with episode 1, had they just made something like, you could have kept Jar Jar, but the thing that was missing from that, if they had made him, instead of an adorable idiot, who wasn't even adorable, but was just a giant idiot. If he had been banished from his city because he was a smuggler or something shady. If he had been on the, the shady side of, like, they're like a Han Solo kind of character, it would have completely changed how that whole thing ran. It would have given him a reason to be around instead of the fact that he was just dumb luck. He would have been useful on purpose instead of on accident. And it would have changed the entire tone of, I think, the whole trilogy, that they never were able to really get out of that kind of dumpster fire of the beginning of that.
Have you ever seen Mr. Plinkett reviews Star Wars?
Yeah, I've seen.
I love them. What do you think of those?
I think they're hilarious. I think the guy's just crazy. He's definitely got a crazy good funny bone on him, because I don't know if I've watched all of them all the way through because they are exhaustively long. But what I have seen of them, which is probably an hour or two of between several of them, it's just hilarious.
Okay.
And he brings up a lot of good points, but it's pretty damn funny too. As a fan of stuff, I can take it for the joke that it is. I mean, it's not any different for me than the people that, go to football games and dressed up all in their team's favorite colors in 30-degree weather with no shirts on. It's stupid. You're being an idiot. It's just a game. I understand that. It's just writing. It's just a movie. It's just a TV show. It's stupid, but, and while you can enjoy it, probably don't take it so seriously. You can't chuckle at it now and then too, and understand for its flaws.
So, do you watch Rebels at all, or any of the other Star Wars TV shows out there?
Yeah, I've seen all the Clone Wars ones, which first season was really rough with the Grievous crap, and then it got seriously good. Mm-hmm. Rebels we're behind on. We don't actually have. We're one of those heathens. We don't believe in television. No. We don't believe in cable, actually. So we stream literally everything we do. It's through like the constant streaming stuff. I save myself the $100 to not watch shows that I don't watch anyway with the cables or satellite systems. So we don't have a reliable way to actually watch it, but I'm probably gonna just buy all of them. I think we watched the first two, or we stopped at the season before Thrawn showed up. Which, I'm a huge fan of Thrawn, and I read the new book that they did based on him as well, where they basically retold his story for the prequel stuff, which was actually very good, and I did enjoy it. But no, we're behind on that. I do plan on watching it though.
Moving on from Star Wars, then let's head on over to ESO. How did you come across Elder Scrolls Online?
I actually was there from the very beginning when the servers first popped open. I never played Morrowind. I just didn't have the opportunity. I had a computer, it just didn't register on my radar at the time. I was playing too much EverQuest, I think, is when they came out at the same time. So yeah, I didn't have time for that. Tried Oblivion. I got a couple hours into it, but their giant fat baby potato heads kind of turned me off to it. It was a beautiful background game until you had to look at somebody talking, and it was just hideous. They were just hideously deformed, mutated, grotesque things. And I know you can mod it out now, but going back to a game like that, did love Skyrim. I don't know lore-wise or where that puts me on the nerd chart for Elder Scrolls, but I enjoyed it. Not as much as my daughter, who has taken it up from me and I think put well into 300 or 400 hours into the stupid game. I don't know how she does it. She just plugs it in. She's in college now, so I guess she's got the time. But even in high school, she was still doing that. But she loves the game. So I've always loved the Elder Scrolls universe, the lore, even though I don't know a fraction of the lore because there is just so damn much. I was always fascinated by that. So we really tried it out. Both Sib, Chris, my wife, we both tried it out, and we had a lot of fun with it. She really actually enjoyed it even more than I did initially. But there were, especially at the beginning, there were a lot of flaws, like design flaws, which they've now remedied. But before the one Tamriel, the way the servers worked, the way instancing worked, it made it really hard on role players. Those that stuck with it, more power to them, because they really had to go through some shit to make things work. But yeah, that was kind of the reason. It was, just as a fan, it was a new MMO. Like I said, I've tried almost all of them. I've played Dark Age of Camelot. I've played Wildstar. I've played Rift. I've played Aeon. I've just, you name it, I've probably played it at least for a couple months.
Maple Story.
Not Maple Story. I said MMOs. Not that Japanese garbage. I actually have no problem with MapleStory, but I never got into those sprite-based MMOs that people like. I understand that they like them, but the aesthetic, it's kind of like, and I'll probably lose some gaming cred here. It's kind of like the Diablo games. Any of those over the top games like that, where the point and click stuff, I can't get into them. It's just something about the design of it. I just don't enjoy it whatsoever.
I think I'm right there with you. I can't do point and click games either. I kind of need like sort of analog control, be it WASD controller or arrow keys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I used to do the real-time strategies, like the Command and Conquer. I can do those, like RTSs, but there's something about, like, is it Dota, I think, is the current, like, Dota and League of Legends, those kind of, it's that same games. Style, those MOBAs. I can't get into them because it's that over-the-top point and click kind of thing, and it does nothing for me. Boring.
Moving on into ESO-RP, what were your first impressions of it when you started out? How did you jump into it?
Believe it or not, the guild that I'm actually in now, and I talk about on our show, I'm in there with Tarvala, is still the same guild. Is a guild I joined when that game first came out, as Servants of the Temple, which is a Dunmer guild with that's obviously that serves the temple for the tribunal. But the problem with it, the guild itself is great, and still is great. Still run by the same gal, Sabea, who has made herself a magistrix, and she's been there the entire time. She's, other than like probably a few week breaks here and there, I think, she's always been playing. But one of the first real big events I remember in ESO, roleplay event, and I've told the story before, but we all got together as the servants, and then there was another guild that we were doing this thing with. They were going to do like a meeting between the guild leaders, and it was like a negotiation for some dumbass thing or something or other. I can't even remember now. And we literally traveled as a caravan from Stone Falls all the way up to somewhere in, I want to say maybe even up into Riften or something like that, which isn't really that far when you look at a map. But when you're walking the entire way, it was like an hour and a half to a 2-hour trip.
Fill that up with a bunch of character interaction.
Right, with
a grand old time.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. The traveling was a lot of fun. Then we got there. Of course, I think before that, one problem we had was trying to make sure that everybody got into the same instance, because, again, instancing was super bad at the time then. People complain about it in one Tamriel now and then in its current phase, and it is nothing compared to everything was instance back then. And we all got to this building that they had chosen to have this, and there were dozens of people there. And I think 4 of them went in, and then everybody else was locked out. We all instanced into a completely different version of that same room.
I can
feel no way around it.
I can feel the big facepalm echo throughout time from that moment when it happened.
And everyone was, a lot of people were a little pissed off. The guild leaders, of course, were super apologetic and felt horrible, but like it wasn't their fault. Like this was within like the first several weeks, I think, within the first month that the game released. So nobody knew this stuff, almost nobody had a high level character yet. Nobody had really tried to do that many people in one group, in one. I think everybody assumed that if we were all grouped together, you would all be able to go in there. And it was such an instance-based thing at the time. The whole thing fell apart, just like that. An hour and a half, 2 hours of travel time, supposed to be another hour or more of actual role play and stuff like that. While our guilds got to know each other, and it just fell apart due to nothing on the role play side. It was complete game mechanics that utterly destroyed it. It kind of spoiled it on me after that, to be honest with you. I kind of left a real sour taste in my mouth, and while I was having kind of fun with the game, I wasn't having that much fun with the game when I still had EQ2 ready and waiting, and with its housing already in place and all this other stuff that it already had, because it was multiple years old at the time. So I kind of just drifted back to EQ2.
Okay, so what drew you back to ESO-RP? Was it one Tamriel?
EQ2 sucks. They
okay,
completely ruined it.
So essentially, one game sucked so bad
I went to it. Right? You see the teeter-totter seesaw thing going on here?
I see it. Oh, man.
But yeah, Daybreak Games basically, the game's, it's an old game. I mean, it's been out for, let's see, what's this? It's been out for almost 15 years now, you know? So it's an old game, and it's showing its age incredibly bad. It's never been well optimized. But when SOE, for as much as people bitch and moan about Sony Online Entertainment when it existed, sold it to Daybreak Games, which is owned by a Russian company called Columbus Nova, which is basically it's out in Russia, but it's just basically it's just they just buy and sell. They're just in it for the money. Yeah, they're basically just a money broker company. Yeah. That's all they bought the property. They don't know anything about video games. They don't give a shit about video games. They fire the most passionate people that were working on EverQuest Next and stuff like that. They fired all those guys. They trash canned EverQuest Next. Tried to claim that what was EverQuest Landmark, which was supposed to be it wasn't meant to be a game in itself. It was meant to be there for the community to help the developers build the actual game. They gave you the same development tools that developers were using to create things, and we're supposed to have contests to recreate famous landmarks in the game, and then they could actually use that asset from what that person created as a player and actually put it into EverQuest Next.
That's so basically you're encouraging essentially player created content to actually influence the game. That's
exactly, and it was actually really if you've never looked up what people made in EverQuest Landmark, I would Google it. It makes what people do, in Minecraft look like they're playing with Duplos instead of Legos, because the dev tools in there it was voxel oriented, kind of like Minecraft is, but on a much more detailed level. And they created things that were better than probably even the development team probably could have done with the amount of time that they were given. But they trash canned all that, and then they tried to pass Landmark off as though that was what it was always meant to be, and it failed immediately. Didn't make probably jack squat in the way of money. It had a few fans of it, but it died, and so the EverQuest franchise has been dying a slow and painful death ever since. And I quit pretty much right after Daybreak got in there. I gave them several months, and I could just see the writing on the wall, and I was sick and tired of giving them my money. And since Chris had always liked ESO, and we had heard about the one Tamriel and all that, and that things were getting better, it was actually a much more fun and playable game, we gave it another shot. Where we've been since probably about almost a year now here, coming up in a couple months.
Looking at the game as it was back then and as it is now, obviously there's been some big improvements. But looking at the game when you first got back and the game as it is now, those two benchmarks, do you think it is still making progress, or has it stagnated? Because I've heard differing opinions about this. Some say that it's going up a little bit, but the rate of climb has slowed. Some say it's leveling out. What's your take?
Going off my experience, I'd say it's still climbing up a little bit. It probably has. I wasn't there when we came in. It was just after the Dark Brotherhood expansion had come out. If I got my timeline right, because that was already in the game. And was it? Or was it? No, it was, or was it just, we got it just before it? Somewhere around the Dark Brotherhood stuff. So I don't know the level of the content and how quickly or not quickly it came out before that with like Orsinium and things like that. So given that we just had Morrowind, this year, and we just got the Clockwork City, which is a zone unto itself, they seem to be doing pretty well, better than a lot of other MMOs are doing. I know Final Fantasy XIV has a lot of they're seriously slowing down on their content. They're charging the exact same amount for all their stuff, and yet their content, their latest expansion, Stormblood, was somewhat of a wet fart by a lot of standards, and now when they do that, they do their stuff is like the 1.0 for Final Fantasy 14 was the really shitty one that basically doomed all of Final Fantasy almost. The one where they had to actually give people free time just to play it. Oh, that was a tough one. Then they did 2.0, which is when they came back with A Realm Reborn and basically revamped the entire thing. And then they do, and the next expansion is 3.0, and now they're at 4.0. And they do 4.1 as their next free content. And it's less and less every time. They're now to have almost 1 or 2 less dungeons per every time it comes out compared to what it used to be. So when you compare it to other games like that, ESO seems to be doing pretty good, and the free-to-play model thing that they threw in there can really doom a lot of games, but somehow they've managed to make it work because they're still running strong. But I'd say it's still on it may have slowed down a little bit. It's hard for me to say exactly, but comparatively to other games in the market at this time, I'd say they're still on an uptick.
I'm glad that you have, I would say, a little bit of an optimistic outlook on things so far, compared to all the huge list of negatives that you've just given me, because I'd be kind of demoralized if I had to do
Yeah, and I've been in it for a year now, almost, back for a year now, so if it's still keeping you going after that long, because I went back to Final Fantasy 14, and it didn't keep me for a year. I don't think it even got 6 months. Black Desert Online was another one, it suffered right off the bat from being an Asian MMO, because they are really, really rough when it comes to that stuff with their grinding and their pay-to-win stuff.
I heard it was said to me that BDO does its absolute hardest to keep your eyes glued to the screen at all times. It doesn't want to let you off.
It does a lot of stuff that other MMOs could learn from. Their combat system is very, very fast-paced, but can also get very grindy. I personally hate the way they don't have I'm old school MMO, I guess, coming from EverQuest. Like, I like how ESO does their armor stuff. You can get the various colors of that kind of armor, the purples and oranges and all that stuff that get stronger and stronger versions, and the leveling of it, of course, too. Once you get 160, it's all the same at least. But I like that, going to a dungeon and trying to kill the boss to get that piece of gear. There's a cost reward to that that's always been enjoyable in almost all MMOs, and even things like Destiny and Destiny 2 out now, and probably the new one that's Anthem that's on its way out here next year. But what BDO did was it was literally a grind fest and a money grab. You could get the armor that you were going to use for the rest of the game at like level 10, and basically you just got other versions that exact same armor, and you would try to meld it, and you had a certain percentage in chance that, okay, so we'll take a sword. So you got an awesome sword. Well, as you level, you want to get that sword up to plus 15. Well, every time you go up to plus, I think from 1 to 7, I think it was, you're automatically going to do it. Every time you combine the two, it goes up by 1 point of its power. After that, there's a chance to fail. And every time it fails, you lose 10% durability on it. And the only way to get that durability back is to, instead of trying to level with it, you have to meld it together to get the durability back. And it just costs in-game money over and over and over. You're basically grinding for the exact same thing or creating it over. It was very, very grindy. Very typical of a lot of Asian MMOs when it comes to the way they do their grind stuff. And I didn't like that system. It wasn't fun. It wasn't enjoyable. Always having the same armor from the get-go. People complain about the cash shop in ESO. Guys, shut the hell up. Seriously. You want to know what a shitty cash shop is? Try every piece of costumed armor that you might get in ESO. In BDO is automatically $30. It's never been less. Every piece of costumed armor is $30.
The way you explain the refinery system reminds me of another game, an Asian MMO that I used to play called Jade Dynasty. Except the difference here is that if you failed to increase your weapon to the next tier, you actually lost your weapon. And the chances for getting from, say, +6 to +7 were sharply reduced. I remember once, and this was back when I was a kid working at McDonald's because I was an idiot, I dropped about $700 worth of refinery gems. They were called Serenity Jades. $700 worth of Serenity Jades in an attempt to try and boost my sword from a +6 to a +7. It's not a decision I was proud of. But
it's one of those ones, like, at the time I had the disposable income. Boy, I could use $700 right now on the game that I no longer play.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is rough. But I will give it to the Asian MMO market. Man, can they create a gorgeous video game? They really know how to make that aesthetic and use the coloring and the palette, and they can make a beautiful game. God, they have to have nothing else to do in their country if that's the way they enjoy grinding. There literally has to be nothing else to do, because that is just dozens and hundreds of hours of grinding for such a small opportunity. And those MMOs are so successful over there.
I think a large part of this because of those, I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but those, they have those gold farmers that live over there in China, right? Have you ever seen, like, their living quarters and the shit they have to go through? Minimum wage, and that shit's like a sweatshop.
Horrible. Yeah, it literally is a sweatshop. I've heard the stories of, from gold farmers and things like that, and the things that they had to do. And there was actually, one of them was there was a guy that did stuff like that here in the States even, and he chose to do it. And it's a miserable existence to do that. It's, it'll be fun to play video games all the time.
Yeah, play video games all day long.
You literally, they can play up to 18 to 20 hours a day, and they have quotas to make, but they don't get, but a fraction of whatever the company is that they're doing it for is going to do. They barely make a wage on it, and there's a reason that, a lot of those guys, I'm pretty sure there's probably a pretty high suicide rate among gold farmers. There's a reason all those names are just typed in like that. That's not actually the same guy getting another account. That's a totally new guy. The other guy's killed himself.
Jesus.
No, it's a miserable existence. And yeah, that's the difference between the Eastern and the Western view of MMOs. It's just, and they bring them over to the West, and they try to dumb it down and make it so it's not like that, like BDO did. But that core is always there, and BDO is a good game. I mean, don't get me wrong. Overall, it actually is a pretty decent MMO. It's just got some features I seriously don't like with the crafting and the equipment system. But some of the stuff it did do, I would love to see stuff like that in ESO. The node connections where they had an entire subset game where, you actually had caravans of your material could travel. You had to buy the nodes. So like if you wanted to trade stuff between, say, we'll go in ESO terms of Mournhold, and you wanted to trade something to Riften, we'll say for Riften, you would actually have to travel that path and connect. You'd have to buy like little campsites and spend points in the nodes and actually connect that so that you could traverse your stuff from one location to another.
So it kind of sounds like essentially setting up a trade route.
Yeah, it's a trading system. It's a trade route system. And it's very interesting, and it added a layer of complexity to the game that a lot of them don't have.
Are there ways to disrupt this trade route system?
Believe it or not, they actually, when it came to some stuff, if your stuff could actually be, you would see them, like players and stuff couldn't do it, but there was a possibility of NPCs actually like attacking your trade caravans and things like that, and you might lose some of your materials. So you would see like they're like little red icons on the map with like it looks like a little bandit skull or something like that, things like that. And they have a lot of really neat stuff in there. It's just just not enough. And for what ESO does do, it does it better. Right. The combat systems in ESO are actually a lot like BDO in that, unlike say EverQuest 2 or World of Warcraft, where you click on an individual or you tab to a character, you're just swiping left and right at the area and you manage to hit anything that gets in the way. Yeah, like which Age of Conan did first, another game I've played. uh, where you didn't actually select things. So, but ESO is a much slower paced combat, even though some people probably say it's super fast because you can die really quickly if you're not paying attention, especially early on. I did it plenty.
I've heard it said that the siege system in Cyrodiil is a lot similar to Dark Age of Camelot. Or no, I'm sorry, Camelot Unchained.
That's one I actually haven't played Camelot Unchained, believe it or not. That was one of the ones I didn't. I played Dark Age of Camelot back in the day, but I haven't played it since. So, that one I'm not sure on. And I haven't done a whole lot in Cyrodiil. I'm not huge on PvP and MMOs sometimes, mostly because I just don't have the patience. There's so much to do. That's really is a problem I have with ESO. There is so much to do.
It's great.
There's entire aspects of the game I've barely touched. Like I've done some PvP stuff, like the was that new, I want to say it's Battlegrounds, but I don't know if that's the right term. Okay, Battlegrounds. I've done some of that.
Verse 4, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But I've not really got into the, Cyrodiil Siege and things. Yeah, I actually love, I've been playing Destiny, and Destiny's, it's PvP, and I like first-person shooter stuff. I'm not opposed to PvP stuff. I just literally haven't gotten around to it in almost a year yet. And part of that's, if I didn't role play, I probably would have. But, when I spend 4 hours a night instead of out leveling or killing stuff, I'm sitting there, role playing one thing over another.
Speaking of role playing, then, let's talk about an interesting character. You mentioned her before, Tarvala Silmorin. I've read the journal entries that you've written about the character. It's interesting. I'll say that. Yes.
That's a very nice way to say you write like crap.
No. Here, let me put it this way. Most of the journals that I've read are deeply contemplative, are deeply, I don't want to use the word edgy, but I guess edgy is the closest word to describe what I've read. But her journal, it's very down to earth, right? Like one of the first sentences I remember reading, I think it was in the second entry, she says, "Sorry, my penmanship is sloppy," right? Most folks wouldn't really write about that sort of stuff. So to me, honestly, I say this, it's very down to earth to mention a small detail like that. It brings out a sense of authenticity for me, for a character. So talk to me about Tarvala. How'd you come up with her? Where did she come from? That sort.
Well, she's a she, obviously.
That's what I meant.
That's the big one. Did I say he? But that's for me.
Oh God.
No, you're good. But for me, I say she's a she because I've tried role playing as female characters before, and it never stuck. In fact, the name Tarvala was actually just used from a failed EQ2 female character I tried to do, and it just didn't stick. So I just reused that name when I tried to create her. And I try to do that with all my characters. Just little, with me for character development and role play, it's little details. It's things like she's got shitty penmanship. Everybody else, a lot of people, they always try to make their character perfect as they themselves might want to be. I actually have terrible penmanship myself, so I was just like, I'll just use that because it's terrible on my end. I write like I have barely learned. I'm barely eligible or legible, but yeah, barely. It's barely legible. I mean, it's like I never got out of the 4th grade, and even what I did learn there, sort of peripheral. It didn't work out that well. So I use little things like that when I come to create the character, and when I do journals, I try to make them about the character, like what the character does and says. And one of the great, there's two books I've read that are zombie books that actually I've kind of learned to do this through. And one of them is Mark Tufo, Zombie Fallout series. He's got several of them, but they're written in journal form. It's the main character, Mike Talbot, is writing his experience as the world goes to shit during a zombie apocalypse. And he's actually very funny, very sarcastic, which is right up my alley. But I've learned through the way he wrote those that you can do a journal in a lot of detail from the character's perspective, because as somebody writing a journal, why wouldn't you be as detailed as you want? You don't have to hold back. It's not like, technically, I mean, when I'm writing it, I know someone like you or anybody can read them. But I write them from the character's perspective that they're the only one that's ever going to read this. So why wouldn't they open their soul and, like, you know, I have her, the reason I have her talking to the journal is from another writer, Chris Philbrook, who does Adrian's Undead Diary, which is another zombie book, and they're very similar in that aspect. But I learned a lot from the way they wrote those journals as those characters. And one of them is just putting in the little details, the, you know, how scared you were to almost lose a family member, or in Tarvala's case, you know, a fellow ordinator or somebody that was close to her that, while not attractively close or like a relationship, they're your partner. You don't want to lose anybody like that. So it's little things like that. And with her specifically, she was created differently than nearly any other character I have, where with most of my characters, I come up with the concept of how I want to be. Like with Xanis, he was largely based on the personality and kind of way of Angel from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. His last name, Sulegna, was actually Angelus backwards. That was the little hint to his, you know, sort of broody, and he had been a really bad guy, but had turned good through reasons outside of his own. And with other characters like Kenix, who I play in ESO, he's sort of a former ordinator, but not really. He's technically.
We'll get to Kenix.
Yeah, we'll still get there. But with him, it was based on another character. But with Tarvala, I came up with all the people around her, and from there decided how that would have shaped her personality. She's a big girl. She's like 6'2". She's very busty and all that stuff. She's basically like a Wonder Woman style. She's an Amazon. She's got that Amazonian body, which in our society, I figured would be something, of course, that nobody would have a problem with. But I also know, sorry, ladies, your secret's out. You are the worst possible people to other women at times. There's nobody that is more cruel and mean-spirited towards a woman often than another woman. I've seen it firsthand through my sister, through just through the women in my life, that the times that they've come home crying or the most upset wasn't because of some dude or something like that. It was because what their supposed best friend had said to them or done to them or anything like that. They can be the worst people, you know, and it's not a gender thing like that, but it does happen a lot, you know. And so I came up with that being Dunmer, being smaller and petite like an elf, would, of course, be more attractive than a giant 6'2" Amazonian. And for that, her mother hated her for it because she was supposed to be used. Her mother's like a combination of Carrie from the movie, if you know how great her mother was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
God-fearing and...
exactly.
I was thinking that there was something wrong with... Oh, lovely role model.
Right, with the tribunal, it worked, you know, like taking that whole thing to the nth degree. And then, and also one of those women that you see that, like, literally from the, I call them the Bonnet movies, like Pride and Prejudice, where some of the characters, all they want to do is increase their social status. Her mother's a combination of those two people. So when the daughter that she was supposed to be able to use and help elevate her status within House Indoril kept growing and eating more and more and started to come off as sort of a tomboy, she went full on Carrie's mom, or was it Mommy Dearest, you know, no wire hangers, started, you know, beating on her daughter and things like that. And that started to shape her personality, in that she was this hideous, you know, beast creature. You know, the other girls that were smaller than her would, of course, you know, whether out of jealousy,
wonders for the self-esteem.
Exactly, would call her, you know, say that she was, you know, she was some sort of half-orc Nord hybrid that just stuffed into a Dunmer body, and just these horrible things as she was growing up and kept, you know, developing, which, I mean, I've not personally done it, but I do have a daughter and I've had a sister, and, you know, that time period for girls growing up is really, really tough, just as it is for guys. But I think it's even harder on women. And during that period, when you're developing mentally, all your personality traits and what you're going to go on to the future, just constantly being beaten down, is exactly what happened to her. And it spoiled her. It made her, when she was forced to go into the tribunal temple, it made her bad at what she did because her mother was friends with the magistrates there in Necrom. And so since the magistrates, the mom didn't like her, the magistrates then, of course, didn't like her either. And when the magistrates it's like when a teacher starts to pick on a kid in class, it's permission for all the other kids to start picking on that same damn kid. And it just beat the crap out of her. And so she came out because of the experiences around her when I created her, not because I was like, well, I want her to be like so-and-so that I've seen in a TV show or in a book.
I think you take a really good approach to crafting her, because it seems to me that you've taken personal experience that is looking at, obviously, from the way your sister was treated, the way your daughter was treated, and I would say from what I'm reading anyway, a large part of that was channeled into the way she grew up. At least that's how I read it.
Yeah.
It definitely makes it easier for someone to craft a female character like that, because I kind of have sort of the same disconnect as well. I cannot myself RP female characters. It's just an impossibility for me. But because it seems that you're basing it on a solid foundation of experience, it's off to the races, really. So let me ask you this. Growing up with the childhood that she had, what was her outlook on life? What were her goals as she entered adolescence and then young adulthood?
Basically just like a lot of, I grew up being picked on too. Big surprise, right? Funny enough, nerd culture in the 90s was not acceptable like it is today. Nerd culture in the 90s was Steve Urkel.
Yeah, it's kind of hilarious. It's amusing, like back then, how nerd culture, I would even say early 2000s, because that's when I had
even still then.
Yeah, it was on the outside, but there seems to be a flip-flop, isn't there? I'm sorry, Go ahead.
No, you're right, because, look at, you used to talk about, like, I was talking to these people on this forum, or this chat, or in this video game chat, and even, like you said, early 2000, probably up until, honestly, probably until, I would say probably the iPhone, in all honesty. When the iPhone, when the smartphones came out, that fundamentally changed the way people looked at computers and that stuff. It became more acceptable to text message and chat continually. We've been chatting on AOL Instant Messenger since the dial-up days, but now text messaging could kind of do it basically the exact same thing, and suddenly it's acceptable. Whereas before, you were an idiot, or on Facebook, you would meet, or on games, you would meet somebody on the internet. I know 2 separate couples that are married today because of the internet, before the internet was cool. One of them met in EverQuest 2, and the other met, I don't even know how they met online, but they met online. She just tried, like a lot of people, just not to be noticed. When you're picked on, you just try to make which is hard for her because she was growing up to be 6'2" eventually, try to make herself as small as possible and just not get picked on. But of course, that often, as it is with a lot of bullies, which is another kind of aspect of what she had to go through, which, even modern days bullying is kind of a big deal. But let's be honest, it forged who I am today too. I was picked on and stuff like that as well. And which is another thing I draw from, because at least in the past, she's no longer obviously like that. She's with good people now, but it still shaped who she was. But she just tried not to be seen, and it didn't obviously work, because the harder you try not to be seen, the more they're going to see you. They see it as, bullies see it as weakness. They see that gazelle lagging behind the rest of the pack, and they're going to pounce on it and tear it apart. It may not be physically, but they're going to verbally just shred her. And that's a lot of where she came from. And then, of course, she was not what her mother wanted. And so she was kind of shuffled off to the temple to learn how to be clergy for the tribunal. And of course, it didn't go any better there. She was supposed to be learning spells. She was supposed to be learning all of the sermons and stuff like that from Vivek and things like that. But because of the constant abuse from those around her, she was terrible at it. She's not a stupid person. She's actually, magic-wise, she's actually got a very deep pool of magicka, but it's very, very untapped, because she never was able to concentrate. So she was seen as slow. She was seen as because of her size, she was seen as stupid and clumsy. And of course, she was from somebody that had to watch their daughter grow up to be 5'10", 5'11", and just shot up. And has and she jokes about it too, but has literally fallen up the stairs at school. I know. She's like, I fell up the stairs at school today. Like, how did you do that? I missed a step and I just kept going up. I had such momentum. She's an absolute sweetheart. She is a real. I don't know how, but she's actually turned out to be a pretty darn. She's actually in college now, so she's gonna be 19 years soon. She's a great kid, but I've a lot of the stuff that with Tarvala I actually pulled from things I've seen her go through as well.
With all that though, how was she able to keep a positive outlook? Because I think developmentally as a child, they would have very low self-esteem, constant self-loathing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and she actually did up until someone actually finally took interest in her as a woman and as a person. Probably, let's see, she's 25 now, so it'd probably be she was actually in her early 20s before anybody even looked at her as an actual person. And it was an ordinator at that temple. I think I named him Raylan after another character I had, which that one was actually based off of Raylan Givens from Justified. If you've ever seen that show, awesome show, definitely worth a view. But he actually showed, he didn't buy into all the crap that he had, when he got assigned to that temple, he didn't buy into it. He just judged people based on what he saw. And what he saw was a whole bunch of bitches and one really sweet girl that just kind of got picked on a lot. So he actually treated her like normal. They kind of slowly, it's one of those stories. They actually did fall in love, and he was her first love, and they did what you do with that. And then unfortunately, because it's a horrible world, the Elder Scrolls, he was shot in the throat on a patrol on a pilgrimage to another temple site in a Ashlander ambush, and died there on the scene without even being able to pull his sword. And she flew into being full size now and still very strong. She flew into a full rage, grabbed his great two-handed sword, and the next thing she remembers is coming to covered in blood, sword dripping, with the other priestesses huddled in a corner of, behind a wagon, staring at her, bawling their eyes out, and, half a dozen Ashlander corpses all over the place, without having any clue what she had just done when she flew into that rage. And that was when she went from temple to clergy and went over to the ordination, when she realized that something in her flipped at that point, that she wasn't doing what she wanted to do. She wasn't doing what the tribunal was probably calling her to do. And even against her mother's orders, which was the first time in her life she ever stood up to her mother, she transferred over to the ordination, which is when it kind of picked up with her story over at the Servants of the Tribunal.
Talk to me about your time currently in the Servants of Tribunal, and how I have the best words, I'm just lacking them today. Come on, Mikey.
I know the good words, I have the best words, all the best words. People tell me all the time, Mikey, I got the best words, you got the best words. I know this, they're telling me nothing I don't know.
So talk to me about Tarvala's time in the tribunal, how it's changed her from when she first entered and how she is now.
Probably the biggest thing would be Sabea, the magistrix there. Of course, she wasn't poisoned against her by the mother in a previous, friendship like the last one was. And also the other ordinators there, while they are tough, people like the two high ordinators there, Lulel and Roger, they are definitely in character. They are tough. They lash people and stuff like that when they don't do what they're supposed to do, or they don't follow orders in the middle of a fight, things like that. They're what you would expect out of like a military kind of organization. Out of character, they are totally cool and they're good people, which makes it a lot easier. But it's even though she has been whipped for things like that, I think twice so far, it wasn't out of the fact that it was just because of who she was. It was because not of who she was, but what she had done. So it was based on
some sort.
Right. It was based on the merit of her actions, not on just the fact that she existed. And she's slowly come out of her shell. She had never really had friends before, and now she's surrounded by people she considers friends, people she would actually give her life up for. You know, at first she had to learn how to use the mace and shield of the ordination. She actually had to earn permission to continue using Raylan's greatsword, which she now has strapped to her back at all times, that she's made full ordinator. Because in that guild, you actually start out as a recruit, and you basically work your way up. They have great ceremonies and things like that, all text-based on the Tribunal and the Three and things like that. They do a really good job of keeping it in the Dunmer, and not just like Dunmer, because clearly you play the game, you play any of the Elder Scrolls games, not just Dunmer culture, but really they'd be like the Vatican City of of Dunmer culture. It's deeply steeped and roasted in the Three's ways of doing all that stuff, and the sermons, and I mean they take it to heart. It's deep on that on the roleplay lore side. So yeah, she's definitely come a long way in the years since she's got there.
Okay, so with all that being said, then talk to me about a specific event or a significant event besides Raylan's death that has changed Tarvala exponentially. As if you could point to an event that says this was how she was before, then after this is how she is afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, getting the full ordination armor, because when she's not in armor, she's not exactly sure of herself. She still has all that baggage from her past is still there. But the second she puts that armor on, in the visage of the Navarian, she is an ordinator first and foremost. She knows that all that indecisiveness just washes away from her. So when she got that armor, that was probably one of the biggest moments. But the steps to lead up to that point were also, you have to do a trial of mystery and a trial of mastery. And for that, I actually got tagged with another guy that was going going for ordination at the same time, Theo. And there was a couple events run by Roger, who's the High Ordinator I mentioned, who's the Ordinator of War in this guild. And they actually had to stop, I think it was 200 or 300 Khajiit slaves had revolted and ran out on this house in the city, and they were sent to basically stop them from uprising. And they had to figure out, there was a spy sort of thing going on as well. It turned out that the House Lord was actually stooping one of the Khajiit, which they still to this day are unfortunately came upon under a bridge right when it was getting hot and heavy. And thanks to Roger for putting that horrible mental image in there. Sorry, dog keeps scratching himself. Go on, Spanky. So yeah, they were trying to find out who was leaking information to these slaves when they were trying to flee back, because they were also, is it Dominion that the Khajiit are in?
Yeah, they're in the Dominion.
Yeah, Dominion. They were also former Dominion soldiers, so it would be like 200 extra soldiers the Dominion would suddenly get back. So they were
stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Right. Yeah. So they had to basically they either try to kill them all or try to get them back under control. But they had Sio and Tarvala had tracked down the Lord and found him getting it on with the Khajiit, which to the two of them they nearly retched. I mean, it was yeah. I think Tarvala actually had made Roger almost spit his beer on his monitor, because when they were starting to get into like the sucking noises of things that were going on, she stepped around the corner and was like, okay, I can't handle this. I'm either going to have to arrest or kill you, because, I mean, seriously, do you even know which teat to pull on? I mean, how many does she have down there? Is it just like a normal cat, or do you just go work your way up from left to right in a zigzag pattern? Of course, they were totally shocked, and while she was yammering on, the other guy came and belted them both over the head with a mace and knocked them out, captured them. Worked out really well. But yeah, and then they actually had to after that, they interrogated him together, which, was a really good moment. She had to trick him. She had a grocery list of what she needed on her, and she pretended that it was a writ of execution for his younger brother, that his crimes by being with the Khajiit was so horrendous that they were just going to execute the whole family and call it done. Of course, that wasn't what was going to happen, but it caused him to turn on on his, Khajiit princess, as she was calling him, and give all these slaves up. And as one final act of revenge, because she was so traumatized by having to see a Dunmer and a Khajiit together, she actually put the two of them in the same cage, in the same cell, and then gave the grocery list over to the Khajiit and said, "This is what he just gave up all your people for." At which point she just tore him apart. And then they executed her anyway.
Jeez.
But, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I know it's such a morbid thing to talk about for roleplay, but it was so much fun. And then they had to fight the Khajiit army. Nice.
I encourage morbidity in RP.
Yeah. Well, roleplay is, without conflict, you're just, it's boring. You're just a bunch of people sitting in a tavern talking about nothing.
Not just conflict, but beyond the whole good versus evil. And I don't mean just delving into the shades of gray, but to me, authenticity delves into the fact that the world itself is kind of messy. Elder Scrolls, the universe, is really messy. Mm-hmm. And so to step outside the realms of indulging fantasy and telling a story, I think that a step in the right direction is acknowledging that the world that we RP in isn't exactly all that clean, if that makes sense.
They do that with the lore. I mean, how much of the lore in the Elder Scrolls and ESO contradicts its very self? It's one thing I've noticed. You go into World of Warcraft, you go into Norath, you go into almost any fantasy game like that, and they know exactly how the world was created. They know exactly how each race came about, blah, 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 blah. In Elder Scrolls, they've got like half a dozen or more different creation theories, just like the real world does. Some people believe God, some people believe evolution, some people it's not this God, it's that God. Some people believe it's not that God, it's these gods. In real world, creation it's messy. You've got all these different legends and lores and mythos, and Elder Scrolls has done a really good job of actually recreating that same thing, instead of saying, "Hey, it was in EverQuest, it was Vishen created the world and created all the gods and this and that," and that's just how it is. There's no variation in that. Everybody knows that. Elder Scrolls doesn't do that, and it makes it messy and ugly and gives you a ripe environment to have like theological discussions and role play and fun stuff like that.
Let me top this section of the interview off with a question that's very, very broad, but obviously you can answer however you wish. Where do you want to take Tarvala? What would you like to see her do? What are your goals for her, if any?
She's got herself, there's 2 or 3 other positions above Ordinator. There's Yalif, I think is Ordinator Yalif, and then there's High Ordinator, and then there's Commander above that. I think she's actually aiming for Yalif, which is, she would have a high rank within there, but she wouldn't be at the top of it. She'd be in a spot where she can do what she would feel like is the most good, without having to take on the position of what she has seen because the other high ordinators, they've actually, character-wise, they've been doing it for a very long time as well, and it's kind of ruined them. They can be very bitter, they can be very angry because they've seen so much horrible. It's like what you see with cops or soldiers and things like that. They've seen so many the darkest side of humanity, or whatever you want to call it, for Dunmer, that it's kind of ruined them a little bit. And she doesn't want that to happen to her. She wants to be who she is, but she doesn't want to be despoiled by the position and the duty that she's compelled to do.
Do you think it'll happen?
Honestly, I guess that's up to my guild leaders. It's also a minor officer's position, which, with all that stuff I've led, I I know how to role play stuff like that. So
I mean to say, do you think she will be despoiled by what happens? That's my question.
I really don't know. It depends on. It really depends on the role play. When I come up with my characters like that, I really don't have always an end goal. Kind of like you don't in life. You try not to die. Right. You try not to die as soon as possible. You hope you try to make that as far later in life and make everything in between as comfortable and well done as you can. And you don't. And even though, just like how many people make plans for their life, and that's not how it goes. So she does have plans, but whether that's how it will go, there's really no telling. And it could be as simple as some event somebody does here, in the future might totally change the direction the character goes. Cause I'm big on that. If something happens in role play that can traumatize or, should completely change a character, it may very well do that. They may be able to pull out of that funk. They may never recover, or it might take months, or in role play time, which might be years. Who knows? Depends on how speed goes.
Okay, moving from Tarvala, let's move on to Kenix. Talk to us about him. The angel clone. No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
No, that was Xanis. Kenix is actually, I've based it, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Blacklist with David Spade. David Spade.
I was going to say David Spade usually is in sitcoms.
Different, not David Spade, Spader, whatever his name is. He was the asshole in every 80s movie. Yeah, it's a great show, but he's basically... That's who I based him off of. He's not a good guy, but he thinks he's always doing the right thing, and however he has to get there is how he'll do it. He was a former ordinator, because he was the character I actually created in ESO back when it started, and he was an ordinator in the temple. When I came back, the way that they ran things then, it wasn't quite the same as when I left, but I went ahead and kind of played along with it anyway. In that he's a retired ordinator commander, but what a lot of people don't know is he's not actually retired. He's still working for the ordination, but he's working, like a lot of things do with governments, which is basically what the tribunal is a theocracy. He's helping keep an eye using, as with the Morag Tong now, and he's helping to keep an eye on them as being one of them, as supposedly a disgraced ordinator and retired and all that stuff.
But it's actually a deep cover thing.
But he's under deep cover, and he has had to do horrible things because of that. But he still follows the rules of the Morag Tong. I've had things where he was been outside of Morrowind, or when he's inside Morrowind, where if it's a Dunmer, actually, what was it? The thing that Human Floyd did with us. There was a point.
Yes, on Scrollplay.
On Scrollplay.
Right.
There was a part where Kenix actually said, when they came up to a camp, that he hopes that if any of them are Dunmer, that there's nothing he can do, because they were within the grounds of Morrowind, and he, by the rules of the Morag Tong, he doesn't have a writ. He would not be, unless they attacked him first. He has no legal recourse to kill them. So he's still got to follow that. It's a tricky play with him. I don't play him as much as I probably should. Tarval has kind of taken over as my main, just because she's so different than anything. I've played assassin-y characters before. So with Kenix, there's a deeper level to him than a lot of my other assassins, but he still doesn't get as much play as I would like, mostly because that horrible real life thing keeps getting in the way of all my fun.
Goddamn real life.
Right? Garbage. Stop sending me electric bills. I wouldn't have to worry about it. But and a lot of that isn't known. I mean, it's known by me, and I guess by everybody now that listens to this. But I've really very few people. It's supposed to be hidden, so it's just part of his character. It's not something, unlike most assassins where they're like, "Hey, hi, how's it going? I kill people for a living." Yeah, I'm not saying I'm an assassin, but wink, wink, I kill people.
If I had half a gold every time, not every time, but the amount of times it happens, like in places at the Wither Tree or some Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. You go ahead, sir.
Right, you know exactly. Oh, you're fine. You know what I mean. Anybody that's role played,
Yeah.
There's some people, the best people that role play an assassin, you don't know they're role playing an assassin, until it comes to that. Unless, of course, your
words have never been spoken.
Yeah,
that is very true.
And of course, it's role play, so you still have, the character's inner circle of friends. They might know, because otherwise, it could get a little stale. So there has to be some give and take because of the role play nature of it. Otherwise, it's terrible storytelling, which is what role play basically is just shared storytelling. But giving it out to a random stranger at a bar, that's not good storytelling. That's just being an idiot. For him, it's a lot of stuff in the background. It's always there in the back of my mind because it influences everything that he does, but nobody else would know that.
So let's pair up Tarvala and Kennex side by side. What is it about each of them that you enjoy RPing?
With Kennex, he's actually allowed to be kind of that darker nature of, I can go pretty dark when it comes to stuff like that. So I get to do a lot of that darker RP with him.
Broody and edgy.
Yeah, broody. I'm an edgelord, level 15. Right, exactly. Which I hate that phrase, by the way, edgelord. It's such a derogatory and such an insulting thing to say to people. Just because they have a somewhat edgy or dark character doesn't make them an edgelord. What makes you an edgelord is just being an asshole about it and saying, I'm an assassin, I just met you, and this is crazy, but I think I want to kill you. That's being an edgelord. You're just a dumbass. So, and he has that a very dry wit, which I like sarcasm a lot. It's actually a second language and a third language for me. But he gets to be very dry about stuff like that. He'll insult people to their face, while maybe not even making them realize they're being insulted. So that's always fun for me. And with Tarvala, she's actually fairly innocent and she's just so outside of the box of anything I've role played before. So that's what's really, really attractive about her is she really is, and because of the ordinator thing, she's really like role playing two different people. There's, for those that old anime people, she Vash the Stampedes it. She can go between.
No, that's an anime I haven't.
There you go. In a long time. But he's utterly silly. But the second the shit hits the fan, he's super serious, and that's gets things done. And she's a lot of the same way. When she puts that ordinator armor on, it's all business. And outside of that, she's kind of goofy and ditzy and a little bit silly, and she's a hugger, at least with the friends that she has now. And she just wants to see everybody around her be happy and not miserable all the time as best she can, even though she might be at times as well. She would rather focus on trying to make other people's lives better than, try it. By doing that, it makes her feel better and her life better in equal parts. So yeah, they're kind of the opposite ends of the same coin in a lot of ways.
The next thing I want to do now is I want to get into a bit of a meta conversation or meta discussion talking about the ESO community at large, because I feel that since we're both podcasters, we can take a magnifying glass to the community, to RP as an aspect, and examine it. So what I want to talk to you about is the community versus how you knew it when you first started versus how it is now. How do you think it's changed from then and now?
Well, you can actually see people when you're inside a building. That was a good first start. You can actually go to the withered tree and see other people. It's amazing.
I wish you didn't, because
yeah, if you've gone there enough,
for the withered tree.
Yeah, you may have met Jazz Cial on her Cial character. She goes there quite a bit.
I've seen her a few times. And,
she enjoys the hell out of that crazy stuff. I don't know what's wrong with her. She's mentally unstable.
Maybe.
She's known me for 12 years. She's clearly not right in the head.
Well, okay. Let's talk about the ESO-RP forums then. How about that? It's not as bad as it used to be, which was
pretty bad at one point, which I attribute to the megaphone effect. You know, like when you give everyone a megaphone or a speaking platform, they'll yell at each other even louder to make sure their voice is prevalent. Which can be a hotbed of shit sometimes, you know, especially on the RP forums, which I think was the problem.
They can be, yeah. I've gotten into it with a few people. I agree. I agree with more than I disagree with. I'll say that. There's some people on there that I see over and over. God, I wish I had their job where they're able to actually be on there as much as they are. I used to have a job like that where I could forum haunt all day, but unfortunately, being a postal worker and driving your mail around, texting on forums at the same time while driving a vehicle turns out is a bad idea.
Yeah, kind of a bad idea. Going back to the topic of the forums, though, there's a distinct duality to the forums, an overarching duality, I'd venture to say. One side is that it's a great place for sharing ideas. At the same time, it's a place like most of the internet where everyone has a megaphone, and when people have this, the arguments tend to be that much more public. Whenever an argument comes up, it's always the same damn people that just get into it. But anyway, let's not focus on that, because I want to focus on the other thing, which is idea sharing. As for idea sharing, well, I think the best example of this is a thread, really, that's called On Magic, an RP guide for using magic by a user by the name of Art. It's pretty damn comprehensive.
The magic thing sounds pretty cool, because that's one aspect of ESO. I've actually gotten into, I wouldn't say an argument, but a disagreement on how Magica worked in the game with somebody. They were throwing fireballs. It was actually a training thing, throwing fireballs, and I actually tried to use the mace to try to almost like redirect it, kind of like, I guess, like Link in
Baseball
to the
bat.
past. Yeah, like a baseball bat. And they're like, no, that's not how it would work. Do you not know how magic works? I'm like, magic, the pretend thing that works however the hell we say it does? That thing? Because I'm pretty sure if she, you can have it either way. Her response was that it was supposed to have splattered and then washed all over her. And mine was like, no, she charged the mace and, swatted it so that she could redirect the fireball back at the person or redirect it away from her. And,
Was
it really
enchanted.
The mace?
Yes.
It's an ordinator's mace, so I think so. And she also has, the Tarval is one of her skills. She's really, really good with fire. She's good with fire, earth.
As is a Dunmer, sure.
Yeah. And and even on Dunmer standards, she's really good with fire. She's got a real aptitude for it. And she's good with earth and lightning. Sucks at water. Can't do jack squat. She can make an ice cube for her tea, but she is terrible at ice magicka. Because you've got to have, like in roleplay, you got to have ups and downs. You can't be great at everything. So when it comes to that, she's got very little when it comes to that. But so it was kind of it was a disagreement, and it got a little heated because it really could go either way. There was no reason for it to get heated. It was just as easy to let her swat it back as to completely stop everything that everyone was doing to have this discussion suddenly. So and like I said, it's an ordinator's mace, which I'm pretty sure they're all blessed and magicked to begin with. And on top of that, she, charged it up and tried to send it back.
I would say if typically magic with magic, right, perhaps would have had an effect. But if it was like a regular old mace with...
Yeah, like if she hit it with a log, it would have burned up the log. Yeah. And I agree with that, yeah. But besides, getting off the topic on that, but yeah, the roleplay forums on that in general, there can be a lot of good discussions. I will say one of the things, and to my Khajiit roleplayer friends out there, I'm sorry, this isn't all of you, but the ones that talk like a Khajiit out of character drive me up the fucking wall. Stop that shit. You're not a Khajiit. Don't talk out of character like a Khajiit. It just makes things confusing. And I know there's somebody on the forum that does it every goddamn time he posts. And I'm sure he's a fantastic guy. but stop it. Just make your damn point as a human being without all that I and we and this one bullcrap. Just say your damn point. It just drives me up my mind. If he does, dude, I love you as a brother and a fellow role player, but you have got to stop that shit. It is just confusing and aggravating. You have good points at times. Stop it. I'm begging you. You're making you're what other people look at role players as. Like, they can't separate reality from fiction. That's exactly what you're doing. Knock it off.
I have a feeling that he'll look at this and he'll probably feel emboldened.
Probably. And I might be exaggerating my level of, okay, no, I'm not. Just stop it. Just knock it the fuck off.
Moving right along before the comments and the replies to this episode get turned into a total toxic shit fest. It's going to turn into a toxic shit fest, but what are you going to do?
What can you do? It's my opinion that the opinions of the guest are not the opinions of the host.
Speaking of opinions, we are now going to get into our final segment of the interview. Mike, thank you so much for being my guest for this episode. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for actually letting me call in and hearing me out for opinion pieces. We are now going to get into our 10-item questionnaire, first championed by Bernard Pivot and then used by James Lipton. This questionnaire lets folks get a glimpse into your personality in ways that they never really considered. So,
you've been forewarned.
You've been forewarned.
Let's hear it.
All right. Number 1. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word, barracuda, because it is just that damn fun to say. You can
Barracuda. It's
just a fun word. I've always loved that word ever since I was a kid. Don't ask me why. Barracuda is my favorite word.
What is your least favorite word?
Probably cunt. I don't like anything about that word. It makes my skin crawl, even just saying it and even thinking about it. Every time I read it online, I despise that word. I've always hated it. It just sounds awful.
See, because of those reasons you've mentioned, actually, cunt is my favorite swear word.
See, I don't even like it. It's just one of those, it just makes me uncomfortable.
Exactly, that's the whole point of it. Like,
right, and it's
you go up to a guy that you just fucking hate, and you fucking STD loose cunt. What the fuck is wrong with you? You know?
See, yeah, and it just makes, there's just something about it that makes my skin crawl. It wouldn't make me, like, if you called me that, I'd probably laugh. But just like reading it online, I've never liked that word.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Man, probably the breast size. Oh wait, what? Oh, creatively. Never mind. Sorry. Old Mike Myers joke from How I Married an Axe Murderer. What do you find attractive in women? Probably breast size. Probably just the being able to interact with my friends or bringing. I know it's going to sound so cheesy. God, even just thinking it. If somebody enjoys something I've done and it brings even just a little bit of, like, if I can make somebody laugh or chuckle, I love making people laugh. I love making my wife laugh, especially. That's actually how I plan to kill her one day, is make her laugh so hard that she just stops breathing or has a heart attack. Nobody can trace the murder back to me that way. I've always loved making people laugh. So if I can do something, that's part of why we do the podcast, is entertainment's the first thing. I just want to make people laugh, and anything I try to create or enjoy it, if I can't make them laugh, just, that's pretty much it. Just an enjoyment that other people might take out of something I've done.
What turns you off?
Barracudas.
You can't have the same answer twice, damn
No, it's just everything's barracuda. Like creatively and stuff like that. Gosh, I'm actually a pretty terrible person when it comes, other than the not liking the cunt word, and even then, I could live with that. It's just my least favorite word. Just sheer and utter ignorance and stupidity of humanity most of the time. I guess is that an acceptable answer? I just can't stand stupid.
Well,
especially on a massive scale, or okay, I'll narrow it down. Willful ignorance. There's nothing that annoys me more and turns everything to shit in my world than seeing somebody that's just willfully ignorant.
What is your favorite curse word?
I've always been kind of a fan of fuckstick. I don't know why.
That's one that doesn't get tossed around here.
No, it doesn't. It's fuckstick probably.
It's 2 syllables, nice and to the point.
Yeah, you're being a fuckstick for asking me all these fuckstick questions. See, look, I mean, it works on so many levels.
What sound or noise do you love?
I pretty much answered that one earlier. Hearing my wife laugh, there's nothing that lightens my day more than when I can really get her going.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Women. Am I right, guys? Am I right? Don't air that. I'm just kidding. Air it. Sound or noise do I hate? I'm going to repeat that a couple times as I actually try to think of what that might be, because that's the tactic everybody uses when they're not actually sure right off the top of their head. That one's a bit tougher. Oh, okay. Oh, no. I got it. Nails on a chalkboard. Or forks on a plate. That makes my... makes my spine just... I cannot stand either one of those sounds. Absolutely can't stand it. I never have been able to.
What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
I'll be honest, I've always wanted to try voice acting. It's just part of why I very poorly attempted doing our podcast at times.
Especially with those creative commercials.
Yeah, right. I've always done definite accents and things like that. I've grown up with all of them. I grew up to nice Mr. Kelly next door when I was a wee lad, and he was from back in the homeland of Ireland, like that. And he'd always spray me with a hose, and he'd always get such a jolly out of it. Things like that. I've always enjoyed accents and imitations and things like that. And, I could do quite a few of them. I would always love to have given that a shot. Unfortunately, I live in Oklahoma, where we don't have anything like that, since Funimation's down in Texas and everything else is out in California or New York.
What profession would you not like to do?
I would not like to have been Mike Rowe during Dirty Jobs.
That was a great show, though.
I love Mike Rowe. He is a hero of mine.
He is an American hero, for sure.
He is an icon and a treasure. He did every shitty job none of which I would want to do, to anywhere from sucking semen out of a turkey to going down in sewers or anywhere near Alaska. None of that shit. I would not want to have been that man to do that show. I could not have done it and then told jokes like he did the entire time. There's no way. No way.
And finally, for our last question, if heaven exists, if God exists, what would you like to hear him say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Damn it, man. Most of what you did was not right, but fuck if it wasn't funny.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our episode. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Mike, Ashen Phoenix, it's been a pleasure. I definitely hope that I have you again as a guest.
Anytime, Mikey. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a very long lot of fun, and I've actually enjoyed every second of it. It's been great. Appreciate you having me.
See you guys later.
Later.